Hey, it's 11:40 The Bet and Audacy Sports. This morning, I woke up refreshed, prepared to talk to our correspondents in Phoenix at Radio Row for the Super Bowl. But then here in Vegas, we have breaking news regarding the Las Vegas Aces. And I'm not talking about Candace Parker's introductory press conference. And the man that broke the news, I'm happy to say, second time on the show, means he's officially a friend of the show, a friend of the station. Howard Megdal joins us from the next. And Howard, we'll start off with this. What the hell's going on with the Aces for those that don't know?
Over at the netshoops.com. By the way, thank you for having me here and making me a friend of the show. I feel great about that. I love what you do. This morning over at the Next, we reported that the WNBA has begun investigating the Las Vegas Aces over what allegations are that they have paid players in a way that circumvents the hard salary cap that the WNBA has. And if that is found to be the case, that is a direct violation of the collective bargaining agreement that was signed back in 2020.
And to get me up to speed and kind of apologize for my ignorance, this would be kind of the same situation or penalty if found guilty, similar to what the Liberty had to deal with last year with the charter flights, or is this just not applicable?
So it's not clear what that would be if, in fact, that happened. And I'll take you through it for a couple of reasons. Number one, several people, we have 9 sources confirming that this morning in today's story that we wrote. Several pointed out independently of one another that this is several orders of magnitude more serious in their view than the Liberty providing an additional benefit to their current players. This is an inducement. The allegation is an inducement to both sign players to extensions and get players to join them who aren't already on the team. So this is directly affecting competitive balance of things like who is on your roster and what players are available to be signed. So that's one thing. Another thing, of course, is whether the league finds it to be the case, if the league treats it as one big violation or as a series of violations if it happened more than once. There's a lot of different things that go into it when it comes to those questions. And there is a lot that's unknown. I think it's important that we stick to, what we know, and what happens next is significant no matter how it goes. But it's important to remember how much we also don't know. And where this goes from here is definitely one of them.
And a clarification as well. So as it stands now, we have the Players Association investigating the team because of Dearica Hamby and what she's accused the team of. And then the news that you just broke, is the actual league, the WNBA, investigating the Aces for circumventing the cap, correct?
Yes, to an extent. The WNBPA has been pushing for a lead investigation into Dearica Hamby's comments and concerns, and this is, it is not clear whether that is a multiple prong of an ACE's overarching investigation or a second separate investigation. In either case, it's essentially a distinction without a difference. Those are both things the league is looking into.
And for those listening and watching, I think it's important to point out, obviously, Dearica talked about her treatment and her going through her pregnancy and how she was treated and what was said to her. But in her statement, in her Instagram post, she did mention that she was promised things. And of course, she took a pay cut to make it work. A lot of the Aces players have. This might shed light. It might be a part of what the WNBA is investigating. And sorry, I apologize because of my scattered brain and I might be going all over the place. But one of the interesting things is, of course, this free agency period, a lot of the conversation or the buzz topic has been this is now the super team era and how Joe Tsai's come into the league and really invested in his players. And then Mark Davis has invested in these players. And to me, it kind of seems like the Titanic where we're leading into a situation where these owners and they're like, hey, we're trying to invest and we're trying to win, and you guys aren't allowing us with this salary cap and stuff. Like, how do you see this being playing out big picture wise?
Well, big picture wise, there's a real further elaboration of what has been a concern by many of the newer and more aggressive owners for some time, which is namely, there is a desire to invest in the product. Finding places for it to go is a little bit like in plumbing, the water has to go somewhere. And how you go about doing that can take any variety of ways. There are aspects of the CBA that allow for further investment. That's why you see things like big new practice facilities springing up in a lot of WNBA markets. There are areas where things are clearly prohibited. Giving players outside income in this way is expressly prohibited in Article 25 of the current collective bargaining agreement. And then there's a lot of gray area in between. And the bottom line here, though, is that a CBA signed in 2020 at a time that a WNBA franchise could get about $2 million, which is what Mark Davis paid for the Aces, is not necessarily relevant financially in a place where the great Rachel Bachman of the Wall Street Journal reported today, the Seattle Storm were just sold, minority shares were sold of it at a valuation of $151 million. There is a huge growth. There is going to be rightly
That discrepancy is massive.
Get that money. That's correct. Well, look, you're seeing it in NWSL as well. In the National Women's Soccer League, the Utah Royals are exercising an option they had at the time that they disappeared from the league to come back at a valuation of $2 million for an expansion team. The other two expansion teams are being sold at $50 million per team. This is the rate of growth. I've said this many times. Women's sports is the developing economy. Men's sports is the developed economy. And in a developing economy, you see the graph, it goes like this.
No, 100%. I got to be honest with you, as I'm taking this information, as I'm reading what you did at the Next Hoops, which we'll link here for those that are watching or on the podcast. I kind of like, there's a lot of issues going on with the Aces, right? And to me, more attention should be put on how Dearica was treated, who said it, what's their punishment, and what's the fallout from that. Because that's an issue that is bigger to me. How this plays out and how this is handled kind of sets a precedent for the NWSL, like you said, these other teams in the WNBA. But when I look at what Mark Davis is doing or what he's being accused of and what they're investigating him, listen, man, like, he's trying to win and figure out a way to get these players paid. They deserve it. Like, I find it hard to be upset at this. Granted, I'm here in Las Vegas. I'm sure Chicago Sky fans and Indiana Fever fans are like, they're cheating. I don't know what to make of this and be upset. I don't find an area to be upset at this at. Am I wrong for that?
No, it's this is all incredibly complicated, right? This is all, nothing can be pulled on without it affecting a different area when you pull on it. And that's going to matter both in terms of what the perception is about this moment. By the way, I'm not here to be mad at anyone. I'm here to report what's happened.
Yeah.
And then what happens next will also be something that will need to be reported on. There needs to be a light shined on in the same way that, by the way, Dearica Hamby has made very serious allegations, and we in the media need to neither brush them off nor assume the Aces have done something short of it being investigated. It's important to let processes play out and not let reporting get ahead of it in either direction. And I'm disappointed when I see people do that in either direction. Now, all of that said, to what you're saying about the money and the finances, yes, it's incredibly hard to not wish that the players in this WNBA get paid more, get to have charter flights. There's a whole host of ways in which, as somebody who's covered this league for a long time, you want to see it happen. There's also ways in which you want to see it happen in a way that preserves everything from competitive balance to a team's ability to plan for the future. There are owners upset about this who are very much in favor of spending more money on players. There is a fairness issue here that goes along with the financial issue as well. But the other side of this, and I think this is just as important, there's no easy answer for what Kathy Engelbert can do if it is found that the Aces did this. And in that same way, these are allegations. They need to be investigated. We need to understand what has happened. The league needs to make transparency key, which is not always the WNBA's calling card, would be the nice way of putting it. National Women's Soccer League has gotten better at this after a long period of time when NWSL was extremely poor at transparency as well. So there needs to be sunlight. But let's say hypothetically, you're looking at a punishment in the event that Vegas has done this. Well, if you simply were to fine Mark Davis, would that be sufficient to deter him from doing it again and have other teams follow suit? Unlikely. If you simply take away draft picks from a win now team, oh goodness, he can't draft 11th or 12th, but he was able to pay whatever he wanted to put his team together. In that scenario, does that stop him or others from doing it? Very unlikely. But if you do things like void contracts, if you do things like reduce salary cap space and roster space, then not only are the Aces paying a potential price for it, so are the players involved. And how you feel about that is complicated. And how the league will feel about it is complicated. And how the PA will feel about that is complicated. So there's a lot to figure out.
And I wasn't shaking my head at you, and I just the situation. If that's where this ends up, and I don't mean to be the little brother yelling or who just got yelled at by mom and pointing the finger at my other little sister, but can I reckless speculation? What about New York? What about New York when it comes to the Liberty and them putting this roster together? Are you hearing anything, or are they going to be next? Like, I feel like now every team's going to be put under the microscope with this.
If I hear anything, I will report it out. And here's what I will tell you. 3 different people I spoke to for this story, independent of each other, made a point to say, this is not what we've heard from New York. This is orders of magnitude more significant than what New York did last summer with the airplane. So that is not the view around the league, would be the easiest way for me to put this.
Fair enough. And as I'm scrambling now, I want to put a bow on this specific thing, because I want to focus a little bit more on Dearica Hamby and how the Aces handled the press conference yesterday with Candace Parker and everything. Trying to make sure that I ask everything when it comes to the Aces or this particular situation. I don't know. To me, it's a little baffling, and I understand it. And I just think that pressure is being applied to owners that don't necessarily want to invest or put in the effort that others are, and that's creating an imbalance. But it's also like, if you're not going to put in that effort, why are you complaining? But I guess since my head's drawing a blank, let's move over to the Dearica Hamby situation, and we'll start off with the press conference that was intended to be all about Candace Parker and Alicia Clark, but this was the first time that the Aces has spoken out or sent out a statement or just made themselves visible to the world. President Nikki Vargas, Natalie Williams, General Manager Becky Hammond were all present alongside Candace Parker. And it was not good from my perspective how it played out when it came to them in their statement regarding Dearica Hamby. How did you take everything, though?
I am a big believer in transparency whenever possible. And I don't think, if you take the full measure of what happened yesterday and the last couple of weeks, that we've seen anything approaching that. In terms of the specifics and not being able to address the specifics, there were basic ways from a PR perspective that could have been done as well. I think it's fairly clear that, given what has happened since and given the reaction, that that goal was not achieved. That's probably the easiest way for me to put it.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I already know, if you're watching this on YouTube, we're gonna clip what happened, which was a local reporter here from Las Vegas, Andy, whose last name I can't pronounce, but he's from the Review Journal, covers the team, does an amazing job.
Yes.
Basically kind of wanted to get Nikki's comments and immediately was cut off and told that Nikki had a meeting. But unfortunately, Nikki's camera was still visible and she was still in the Zoom conference, just sitting like she had been. And then awkwardly had to immediately leave out of there. So it was not a good look. Only about 5 to 7 media. I think a total of 6 questions for everyone.
Yeah.
The one that was sent to the Aces to try to comment on this was immediately cut off. You weren't allowed to ask a question. I wasn't, or we weren't picked to ask questions. There was there was about 70 media members from across the globe that were there. Because like we said, this was the first time for Dearica Hamby. Their reaction or
Can
their
I say
side of it.
something
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
significant here? Leave aside this particular moment. If the WNBA and women's sports in general truly wants more coverage, what they need is if the WNBA truly wants more coverage, if women's sports truly wants more coverage, they need to embrace all the coverage. They need to answer the happy questions and the sad questions, the difficult questions and the easy questions. And anyone who pretends that they want the coverage, but will not facilitate allowing it to happen, is simply not walking the walk. And everyone in this side of the industry, everyone knows that there are some people who talk the talk and do not walk the walk. And it's evident. And everybody loses when that happens. The coverage suffers, the team's ability to be in the public spotlight suffers. Money is lost on the league and team side when media is not fully allowed to do their job.
100%. Hey, Howard, I'm gonna tell it to you like this. My dad was a Cleveland public school teacher for 35 years. I was a kid that got suspended 30 times. I was terrible at school. One day my dad shows up and has a conversation with my math teacher. Math teacher's explaining how I'm a bad kid. My dad had to cut him off and go, "Hey, we get paid to teach the bad kids, the good kids, the ones that are very active and the ones that aren't." It's the same situation. Good news, bad news, you have to cover it all. And I guess my final question before we get you out of here, and again, thank you so much for the time and the coverage and everything you do, is from a grander scope with everything from Dearica Hamby being traded, her Instagram posts, going to the Sparks. What do you make of it all?
I mean, I'm not prepared to draw grand conclusions, and I know that's unsatisfying. But
Yeah.
what I make of it all is just about every topic writ large that's going on in the world of women's sports right now is in play here. The way players are being treated by management, the way in which players are being compensated, the way in which investment is being deployed, all of the things that in a sort of operatic sense, we are thinking about in the world of women's sports and will come to see this era as having defined in some fundamental ways. Those are all at play right here in Las Vegas. It is utterly fascinating. It is the type of thing that deserves massive amounts of coverage. And I hope everyone in Las Vegas media takes up that mantle. And I hope everywhere throughout the Aces, there is an understanding that it is necessary to embrace that as well.
I feel like you just gave me a speech in the locker room to go out and do my thing, Howard. Thank you so much. Again, Howard joining us from the nexthoops.com, his Locked On Women's Basketball podcast as well. We'll put his Twitter, everything for you to follow him, and his coverage has been amazing. And thank you on the day that you break the story. You were able to make time for us to talk about this and going deeper into what's going on with the Aces.
My pleasure. Thank you for putting the spotlight on women's basketball.
Of course, Howard. We'll talk to you soon.